What's up, guys? I'm Chad Barnes, and welcome to the channel. Here, it's all about real car talk, from simple fixes to smart driving tips and keeping your ride in top shape. If that sounds good to you, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button and make sure you watch all the way through. There's a lot of good stuff coming. Let's get to it.
A bit of history. Surely many people remember that the firstborn of GAZ, then still NAZ, Nizhny Novgorod automobile plant, was just a semi-truck GAZAA, which after a small modernization became known as GAZMM. But after the completion of its production at GAZ in 1949, the semi-trucks were forgotten for a long time. There was no such habit in the USSR to save gasoline. What the gondola would take away could be loaded into GAZ-51, GAZ-52, and GAZ-53. There was no need for a motorized truck at all. There was, however, a timid attempt to revive this class of trucks in the person of GAZ-56, 1952, but it did not go further than experiments for the same reason. No one saw the sense in trucks of such capacity. In the 1980s, the situation began to change. Slowly it was realized that it was too expensive and inconvenient to carry 3 bricks on a GAZ-53 or ZO-130. But, strangely enough, the first steps towards a new semi-truck were taken not by GAZ, but by UAZ, which together with NOMI designed UAZ NOMI. But the matter did not reach the assembly line. Why? I will not tell you why. It is the subject of a separate story with elements of industrial espionage and "you are a fool" remarks. The main thing is that in 1988, work on a similar truck began at GAZ. In 1991, the first model was built, and serial production started on July 20, 1994. There was one modification then, flatbed GZ-3302. Very soon other superstructures were added. Then there were all-metal van and bus, the same route GAZelle. GAZelle was not immediately, but it was tried. Its main advantage was the possibility to drive with a car license of Category B, which many people liked. And the car was more similar to Volga in driving. The first GAZelle even had a motor from it, ZMZ402, borrowed from a passenger car and adapted to a semi-truck. And in time it turned out that not only the plant, but also the entire Russian small and medium business was able to get out of the 90s on the shoulders of GAZelle. Since then, the word GAZelle has become a household name. During its life, GAZelle has been changed several times. The engine lineup, the number of body and superstructure variants were periodically updated. Externally, the car was also changed, most noticeably in 2003. First of all, new headlights catch the eye. Then, in 2010. Later, a seriously redesigned GAZelle business appeared, and on April 9, 2013, production of a completely new generation, GAZelle Next, started. Almost everything here has become fundamentally different. Popular engines of this generation are diesel Cummins ISF 2.8. The cabin received plastic fenders, front suspension became independent. We can go on for a long time, but it is better to stop here and see everything with your own eyes. So, let's begin. Engine, as I have already said. Under the hood of our car there is a diesel engine Cummins ISF 2.8. There are some haters of this motor. They say that it is a strange American motor, assembled in China. In fact, there is nothing bad in it. One factory in China assembles a lot of these motors, which are put both in Russian and foreign cars. Assembly there is organized at a high level. According to service specialists, there are practically no typical weak points in this diesel engine. But the so-called dust wear of the cylinder piston group is occasionally encountered. Important point. This wear is often caused by a bad air filter, which is loose in the filter housing or has an incorrect structure of the filter element. What is the point of buying a cheap analog? No one could explain to me an original gas filter even at a dealer costs only 710 rubles. And the risk of getting into engine repair due to excessive savings is very high. And the replacement in the service costs a penny, 252 rubles. Here on the housing are not latches, so you have to take a screwdriver in your hand. Otherwise, it would probably be even cheaper. If you put cheap analogs, dust gets into the cylinders, which leads to rapid wear of rings and scoring of cylinder walls. Well, the loss of compression, especially for diesel, is death. The second problem, which is periodically faced by GAZelle drivers, is premature wear of crankshaft main and connecting rod liners. This problem often occurs in diesels if the driver likes to drive at too high a speed at minimum RPM, In conditions when the load on the liners is maximum and oil pressure is minimum. Cummins have no problems with oil pressure if you do not drive constantly at idle speed under load, but there are problems with liners. But again, it is not the engines that are to blame, but the economy on oil and its replacement. There is one difficulty here. Officially, the regulations provide for a service interval of 20,000 kilometers. But in severe conditions it is desirable to shorten the interval. For some reason, many GAZelle's drivers are sure that their GAZelles do not work in severe conditions, although the city, especially megalopolis, is the most severe conditions, and it is better to change oil once in 10,000 kilometers. At the same time, it is necessary to think about what oil to put in. The factory recommends inexpensive, but quite qualitative domestic oil. The dealer pours barrel oil, and it costs inexpensively, $27.95 for 655 liters. Of course, there are no fakes at the dealer, so oil change once in 10, not in 20,000 kilometers is a good way to prolong the life of the motor. And, of course, the filter is also better to buy in trusted place. Yes, let me say right away, I openly encourage you to have your car serviced by a normal gas dealer. As it turns out, it is not that expensive, and the stereotype that dealer service is something akin to robbery is not correct in the case of the GAZelle. The same replacement of internal combustion engine oil and filters will cost approximately 7,000 rubles. By the standards of modern cars, this is pennies. But let's return to the engine. Cummins has a chain timing. The regulations, of course, do not say anything about replacement of the chain. It is changed according to its condition. But the mechanics couldn't remember the last time they changed the chain separately. Usually it has to be changed only together with the overhaul of the engine. When it is time for overhaul depends on how the car is serviced. On average, up to the mileage of 400,000 kilometers the motors live easily, and on many cars serviced in the Baltic, the mileage has already exceeded 500,000 kilometers, and the motors are still quite working. But these cars were serviced at a certified service center. There are no big problems with attachments. The drive belt of attachments is changed only by wear. The cost of the original belt is 1743p, replacement, 1260, diesel has no spark plugs. However, recently cars with retired starters have started to come to the service. Generators are not asking for retirement yet, but the starter on a car even 6 to 7 years old can fail in case of intensive use. Unfortunately, one should be prepared for this. The weak point of the engine is the EGR recirculation system. Cars with a mileage of even 30,000 kilometers have come for repair. In most cases, the problem is solved quickly and simply, by cleaning the valve and the entire intake. It will not be possible to avoid problems with EGR at all. It is possible, of course, to shut off the system, to reprogram the engine for Euro 2 or 3, the factory here is Euro 5, to knock out the particulate filter and to drive for some time. But this is a barbaric way of solving the problem, and after it there may be questions during warranty repair of the engine. But are there any ways to prolong the life of EGR? Yes, there are. First, do not let the car idle for long periods of time. The lower the temperature and RPM, the more soot is formed during engine operation and the more EGR, throttle, and particulate filter are polluted. Secondly, you need to burn out the particulate filter in time, regenerate it. Sadly, but there is a difficulty with this due to the fact that in the manual about burning the particulate filter is written as detailed, incomprehensible, and boring as in a university textbook on organic chemistry. It is difficult to read it, so, most likely, nobody reads this section of the manual. Besides, several control lamps on the dashboard are responsible for information about the condition of the particulate filter. The lamps may light up one by one, in pairs, they may blink or glow continuously. It is difficult to memorize all these combinations. However, from time to time it would be good to open the manual, because sometimes just a warning pops up that regeneration is about. To start, you don't need to do anything. Drive outside the city at 2000 RPM at a speed of 70 to 80 km per hour, and everything will happen automatically. In other cases, a request to drive to a parking lot and turn on regeneration by force. In the third case, that's it, we are there, call a tow truck. The manual is a useful thing. You can't go anywhere without it. In this case, the problem is solved quite simply. There is a separate button on the GAZelle panel, which can be used to enable filter burning at the parking lot. In this case, you only need to press the button, and the machine will do the rest by itself. To reduce soot contamination of the system, You can contact an authorized dealer and ask to activate the power take-off function. Then, when the engine is idling for a long time, you can press the cruise control button and raise the revs. Fuel consumption will increase only slightly, but soot formation and system contamination will be reduced. One last tip on keeping EGR healthy applies more to garage managers than to drivers. If you have several of these cars in your fleet, you shouldn't put the same cars on the highway and in town. They need to be alternated, otherwise the intake will get covered in soot too quickly on city cars. Of course, low-quality diesel fuel can kill the fuel equipment. There was such a case. A car came, which was fueled with soot only. Once, and it was enough for it, but this applies to any modern diesel. Otherwise, the motor is reliable and does not annoy with trifles. Transmission, we have an old 5-speed gas gearbox. In general, gaze lists had claims to them. Bearings fell apart, and gear teeth were stained. But this applies to earlier boxes. On Next, for some reason, everything is okay with them. The boxes began to live for a long time, of course, if you do not load 3 tons of electrodes into the car. There are no questions about the rear axle. I have never had to change an axle or gearbox on GAZelle Next in a large center where gazes are serviced and repaired on a daily basis. The main thing, again, is not to overload the car quite shamelessly and change the oil in time. Transmission regulations are rather severe. Oil in the transmission and gearbox should be changed often, once in 60,000 kilometers. And do not pour any crap. Their normal original oil is cheap, 910 rubles for 5 liters, in the box and gearbox together. Replacement costs 1080 rubles. There are no questions. And to the cardan gear. Officially, the cardan crossmembers are maintenance-free, so there is nothing to do in them. The gimbal on the Next is from a well-known supplier, and they have not been repaired in Baltiyski yet. This does not apply to modification driveshafts, lengthened ones. Troubles are possible with them. Problems with the clutch occur mainly with those who do not spare the car absolutely. However, the rate of clutch wear depends primarily on the skills of the driver. Chassis and brakes here, of course, we are primarily interested in the front independent suspension, one of the novelties, which, at one time, caused astonishment of old gazellists. Again, on the first cars it was possible to run into some troubles in the form of soon death of ball bearings, but now the quality of components has become quite decent. And many original parts are very modest by today's standards. Ball bearings can be changed separately from the levers. They stand on bolts. The upper ball joint costs 800 rubles, the lower one, 1066 Replacement of any of them, 918 rubles. Even such a consumable as a front stabilizer bushing lives happily ever after on the Next. And it costs only 228 rubles. Rear hub bearings usually last longer than front ones. At the same time, front bearings are rather expensive by GAZelle standards. 6,428 rubles, replacement, 3,060 per side. The rear ones cost only 1,608 rubles, and 2,124 for replacement, but they rarely fail. Original front brake pads at the dealer cost 4,500 rubles. Discs, 3,859p. Whether to save on safety, decide for yourself. Theoretically, there are analogues. The cost of replacement of pads is not too high, 2,304p. Rear, 1,224, front. It is possible to live here. Cabin and frame now, in my opinion, the star hour of Next will come, unlike the old Gazelles, which were eaten by corrosion on the assembly line. Next does not rust, although the modern GAZelle business has a good corrosion resistance. Surely you remember the classic GAZelle, where moths ate all the doors, hood, and front fenders? Well, if you don't remember, look at the old GAZelle, which is still found on the streets. You will see everything at once. Such ugliness does not happen on Next. Of course, first of all, the reason of such beauty can be considered the materials of the cabin and body. All metal, except for the roof, is double-sided galvanized. In addition, the fenders are plastic, and the front part of the cab, to which the radiator, intercooler, headlights, hood lock and bumper are attached, are also made of polymer materials. The service specialists unanimously state that they have not encountered any problems with corrosion yet. They have had a car repaired after a traffic accident, on which even the bare metal that was exposed did not rust. Not only that, the frame with the VIN, which is always the thing they worry about the most, does not rot. And this is great, because the same experts remembered how an old GAZelle fell in half on the elevator. The frame could not withstand it. Not only corrosion is to blame, but also cracks due to constant overloading. It is not scary to elevator the Next on a hoist. You do not have to do something with the cabin, and if you are very itchy, you can change bulbs in the headlights yourself. The access is convenient, so you can do without a dealer. Strangely enough, there are no complaints about the frame being killed by overloading. On older GAZelles it was possible to kill the spring mounting brackets or superstructure by overloading, but on the Nexters, everything has been holding up so far in its almost 7-year history. Perhaps, legal entities, which are the vast majority of owners, feel a little more sorry for their cars than physical persons. But it is not certain. What is the bottom line? To someone, the maintenance of GAZelle Next seemed more overhead compared to the previous GAZelle business. Yes, those cars are a bit simpler, at least in the front suspension. There is a beam with kingpins after all. Someone did not like too low position of the lower arms of the front suspension of Next. But in general, GAZelle Next is a rare example of the fact that complication of the design increased reliability. The first cars had childish diseases. For example, the cable transmission drive with joystick on the panel sometimes needed replacement. But, apparently, GAZ has done the necessary amount of work and brought this generation to the condition. This is commendable. At the same time, it should be understood that anything can be killed, even Next. Unfortunately, the most common cause of malfunctions is the desire to save money on spare parts and consumables. It would be good if they could find decent analogs. Somehow you can survive, although in this case you can lose the warranty even easier. Worse, the spare parts market is full of fakes for original parts. Dealer specialists told how their acquaintances sent them photos of spare parts bought somewhere on the side. It seems that the boxes are similar, and the parts themselves, but they fall apart too quickly. At the same time, their breakdowns often entail a large number of unpleasant consequences. And it is all the more frustrating to get some oil burn because of a left air filter or scuffing because of an oil filter. The second cause of breakdowns is excessive overloading. New cars usually withstand it, but over time it still comes out sideways. It is clear that there is always a temptation to stuff 3 tons into the truck. It is money after all. But is it worth it? If you want to carry more, there are now more load-carrying GAZelle with GVW of 4.6 tons. And it is more expensive to kill half-trucks with such cargo. However, I repeat, if you don't get impudent, the car will survive moderate overloading without problems, and this is one of the differences. That GAZelle can safely boast before foreign cars. In general, it's the same as always. If you look after your car, it won't let you down. If you try to save money on maintenance and spare parts, you will get into trouble and spend even more. The choice is left to the owner. In conclusion, maintaining and repairing your GAZelle Next is essential for ensuring its longevity and optimal performance. By following the guidelines we've discussed, you can tackle common issues and keep your vehicle in top shape. Remember, regular maintenance not only saves you time and money in the long run but also enhances your driving experience. Thank you for watching, and we hope you feel more confident in caring for your GAZelle Next. Safe travels!